Hi, welcome to the State of the Nation. I'm your host, Mike Sham, and joining us today is one of the heavyweights of South African politics, somebody that has remained in the news from long before the dawn of the new South Africa, and that is Tony Yengeni. Tony, welcome to State of the Nation.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, you've had quite the story. I started in the Black Consciousness movement before you joined the ANC.
Yes.
Went into Exile.
Yes.
Did a tour of Southern Africa. I see Lesotho, Botswana, Zambia, Angola.
Yes.
Before you went and to Russia for some time to do
for further training.
Further training, yes. And if almost straight from there to South Africa, that was changing, wasn't it? Well, first they detained you.
From Moscow, I went to Mozambique because I needed to be briefed and debriefed by Chris Hani and Joe Slovo for my new assignment, which was to replace Chris Hani in Lesotho, because the apartheid government had threatened to invade Lesotho if Liabwa Jonathan, the Prime Minister, doesn't remove Chris from Lesotho. So the ANC then took a decision to remove Chris. I met him in Mozambique, and then they asked me to come down to Maseru to play the role that he was playing. So from Maseru, then I came into South Africa. And that was after a year of me being in Maseru.
Okay, and you did spend some time in detention without trial?
Yes.
Yes. They weren't very. The legal process seems to have been as good then as it is now. It took ages.
Yes, I was arrested in 1986, and then we were going on trial until we were released after Mandela was released and other political leaders. So in line with those releases, our case was abandoned. That was 1991.
And of course, those years were fairly strange years, weren't they? I mean, it's quite difficult. I often get asked, and I have to say, South Africa was a very, very peculiar place between 1990 and 1994. It's sort of, you woke up on one day thinking this is going to happen, and the next day thinking that's going to happen. It sort of went from one side to the other. Before negotiations got really serious. And sadly, the thing that sort of seemed to change everything was the murder of Chris Hani.
It was not an easy period because we were just from exile, and some of us were from prison, and you come to a situation where you are told that nothing's going to happen to you, and you are now free, and so on and so forth, because there are negotiations. But at the same time, there was a lot of violence happening in the townships, especially here in Gauteng and KZN, where people were being murdered on a daily basis, mysteriously, by faceless forces that nobody knew who these people were. So there was a lot of tension during that time, building up to the negotiations process. It was not an easy, soft situation. It was very, very, very tense. And of course, the assassination of Chris Hani was the apex of that tension, of that violence that almost destroyed this country.
And that was a moment I remember well. The country could have gone, it felt like the country could go either way. But some diplomacy and statesmanship by Nelson Mandela sort of pushed it in the direction that we went into.
Yes, I think Madiba played a very important role in keeping us together and reminding us that we need to focus at democratizing this country, at having elections and not violence. And to a great extent, he succeeded in stopping a bloodbath, because the Chris Hani's supporters and constituency were very, very angry, and they were prepared to fight it out.
Were you in that constituency?
I was in that constituency because I was MK commander in the Western Cape. So after he was killed, we came together as commanders of various regions of Mkondo Wesizwe, and we started preparing to send our commander, send him off. So we coordinated our efforts, and then from all over the country, and we decided that we were going to give him a send-off at FNB Stadium just before the funeral, where all MK cadres and other comrades would come together and celebrate the life of Chris Hani. And that's what we did. And we were all armed. We were armed to the teeth, all of us. We were ready for anything. We were ready to die that day. But then the government of that time, led by de Klerk, decided not to engage us. So that stadium was full, FNB here in Joburg, full of us, all of us armed, ready for anything. But we conducted the ceremony until it finished without any, violence or outbreak of violence.
Do you think that the way things played out was in the best interest of South Africa for us to go into the negotiations, to get a negotiated settlement? Sometimes it feels like that there's certain constituencies that feel that we should have just had that war and finished, and then after that start talking.
Look, it was a long process of debate within the ranks of the ANC and its alliance about the process of negotiations, the pros and cons, the conditions or the preconditions of those negotiations. So, but eventually, after a long process of internal debate and discussion, it was resolved by the organization that we should engage the regime in negotiations, of course under certain conditions that were enunciated in the Harare Declaration, authored by Oliver Tambo himself. So even though internally, as you are saying, there were those people who felt that this is a ruse, this is a scam.
Should step outside and finish it that way.
To sort of disarm us and disarm our people. We should continue with the revolution until the final end. But of course, after a long discussion within the ranks, the leadership led by Oliver Tambo, President Oliver Tambo, of course advised to a large extent by Matiba himself, came to the final conclusion that peaceful negotiations are the way out and not war.
Do you think it was the right decision with hindsight?
Well,
because it would have been messy. Because at that point you were armed to the teeth, but so was the regime of the day.
Yeah, it was a stalemate. they were not ready to come for us in that way, and we're not ready with our, army to impose our will on them. So that stalemate then led, I think, to the conclusion that probably the best way forward is negotiations. I myself, I was never sure that that was the right path.
Which one? The negotiations?
The negotiations. But like Chris, we submitted to what we call collective leadership, because that time I was already a member of the NEC, and grudgingly or reluctantly we agreed, because we couldn't step aside from the collective. We had to abide by the collective decision of the organization.
Of course, that was a time when there was a far more united ANC, even with its factions.
Yes, the ANC at that point was very united, despite the internal debates and discussions, agreements and disagreements, ideological differences. But overall, the ANC was fairly united, despite as I say, those internal disagreements here and there. But overall, yes, the ANC was fairly united at that point.
And then into the new South Africa, first administration, you head off to Parliament, and roll forward when you get seemingly the only ever high-profile person to be ever held account for any business dealings with state money, and that was via the arms deal, where I think eventually you were found guilty of not disclosing to Parliament. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was, as you are explaining it, except for state money. There was no state money involved in my case, in that the suggestion was, or the allegation was, I got a discount of a car from a car company, and I did not disclose that discount to Parliament, because that discount was seen as a benefit that I needed to disclose to Parliament. I did not. And then that was the basis of those allegations and my prosecution. I still feel up to this day that that was a travesty of justice, in the sense that that was not a matter to be prosecuted by the state. It was a matter to be processed by Parliament through the ethics committee. But those processes were ignored for whatever reason, and the prosecuting authority jumped in and took the matter forward.
Was that through the Scorpions? I suppose it was just before the Scorpions really were constituted.
Yeah, it might be. I don't remember now. But whatever the case, it was the NPA that took the matter forward.
And it seemed like that was the seminal moment where the ANC had to decide what kind of organization it wanted to be. And, you can't help remembering the visuals of you being carried shoulder high by Baleka and Mbete, the Speaker of Parliament, etc., and other parliamentarians, as if something heroic had happened. Instead of supporting the process, they chose to support you. And that seemed to have a chilling effect, which we still feel to this day.
Well, I'm not sure about a chilling effect, but I can say that a number of senior people were feeling very uncomfortable about that case, because, as I say, it took turns that people were shocked that you can deny certain processes and choose others over others. So they were like, what is this? What does this mean?
And so what happened? Do you feel that happened internally? In other words, is this a score settling from inside?
There was, you see, if you look at that picture of when I was put on their shoulders and they were supporting me, taking me to prison, you could feel that those comrades were not satisfied and happy about what was going on. That I was being victimized for whatever reason. Because clearly, I mean, if you get a benefit as an MP anywhere, the first port of call is Parliament, Ethics Committee. And in most cases, the Ethics Committee has found certain people guilty. And therefore, the NPA then takes the matter forward. But in my case, Parliament was never involved at all. Although I was a member of Parliament, not only a member of Parliament, I was the chief whip of the majority party.
Yeah. And at the time, and especially subsequently, there've been, I mean, regardless, if one just looks at it from an impartial point of view, it is like arresting somebody, for not paying for a candy bar in amongst their 1,000 rands worth of groceries, compared to what was to come with corruption. It seemed so out of line with the treatment of many of your colleagues who were quite brazen in their theft and remain quite brazen in their theft.
Yeah, well, the way the media took up the matter, my matter, you would think that I stole millions of rands from a state department or so, of some sort, whereas it was a car discount. And what was interesting is that when they arrested me, I was still paying the car. I mean, through a bank.
Yeah.
So I get a salary, it goes to my account, and then every month I pay for the car. Of course, the discount was in place, was already in place. So it was very strange case. But be that as it may, I think corruption, as you are saying, remains a very difficult problem facing this country.
Well, it's not really a difficult problem. It's one of those, if somebody does it, they should face the might of the law. It's not that difficult. We shouldn't overcomplicate it, surely.
Yeah.
We call it corruption, it's theft.
It should not be difficult. I agree. I was reading this morning when I woke up on social media, a very senior Chinese government official who was sentenced to death for having stolen or got involved in some shoddy business. Sentenced to death. And they mentioned the amounts that were involved. Now, but in South Africa, we treat this thing with kid gloves. A number of very high-profile people in this country were accused of very serious things, very serious amounts. It's not a car discount.
Yeah.
It's like, 500 million rands or 1 billion rands.
Yeah.
But those people have not been prosecuted. And if you don't start with the big guys up there, the small guys were like, oh, okay. If the big guys are not dealt with, we are small fries, we might as well go on with our thing.
But now you're on the NEC, and you can see this happening. You can see, for example, some of your colleagues driving in Aston Martins when there's no ways they can afford it. I mean, you don't have to be you don't even have to do the lifestyle audit. You can just say, how does this work? I'm saying it's pretty easy to work that one out. And state capture comes out with volumes of evidence, arms deal, volumes of evidence. But now I do understand that turkeys people don't go to the police station and say, actually, it was me, so arrest me. But what informs the reluctance of the ANC's leadership to do anything about it? Is it because everybody's in on the game?
Look, the ANC is a very huge organization, and it has different people from different backgrounds, different classes.
But it's getting smaller.
Different strata, yes. And they come in with their new and different traditions and ways of thinking. And then, especially when ANC went into government, it attracted a lot of characters, career people who want to use the ANC for their own ends, government and so on and so forth. And those people have come in and they're there. And now it changes the whole complexion internally of an ANC that is upright, that wants to achieve certain good things for the country, for the people. Suddenly you see things not going right. Small things like potholes. I mean,
yeah. But you're a man renowned for your courage. Mm. Did you not have the courage? Is there not one courageous person there that's prepared to say, guys, what we're doing is really bad. It's bad for the country. We're betraying the struggle. We're betraying the Constitution. Yeah. Why is it that good people are happy to be so complicit? This is a thing I've never understood. And you're the one person that did pay a price. Were you not complicit?
No, I was not. Actually, I was very vocal internally about some of these things, and I would confront these comrades and insist that they must account for their actions. But for a strange reason, even though I mean some of us would do that internally, but state organs who are supposed to take these matters up suddenly are found wanting, are not wanting to engage these allegations because this person is so important, is so senior. Even the media, for that matter, gets into that situation where they don't question anymore. Whereas during that time, our time, early in Parliament, we were pursued by the media left, right, and center about everything.
Yeah.
Gravy train. But today, there can be a big allegation about you. The media will remain mum.
Yeah.
The police will come up and say, we don't sense anything wrong. SARS will say, we don't see anything. So it's also not just the ANC. This has also infected state organs who were found not able to implement their jobs without fear or favor. So that's why I say it's a problem, because then it's not just the ANC that is not rising to the occasion. It's also state organs who are refusing to keep everybody on the leash.
So let's talk about some of those state organs, because obviously, we went through the state capture process. The books have been written. I've got a shelf full of them, of explaining chapter and verse how some of those state bodies were captured. Now, you're sitting there in the NEC. You can surely read these books. You know everything. You've lived it firsthand. But what, I'm asking on behalf of all of these South Africans watching, saying, why did nobody ever have the courage to do any, and to this day, to do something about it? If one looks at the Thembi Simelane case right now, the woman has a case to answer, but the president decides to change her, to keep her in the cabinet, not just in parliament. Isn't this a betrayal of everything you fought for?
Look, I think a lot is going wrong in government. And what worries me and keeps me awake at night is the people who are given the legal and constitutional right to deal with these matters, the police and SARS and Reserve Bank and whoever else, are not doing their job. And they're letting these things go. And I'm saying that it's a problem because if you do that, to one person or to two people, what are you saying to the others? If it is okay for me to keep foreign currency in my house without declaring it, it's okay, it's fine, I can keep it. But the law says something different. Now, when the law enforcers come in and say, okay, let's investigate, they come and say, no, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that. So if another person who's a guy in the street was found with the same, not Yengeni now, somebody else, are you going to treat that person the same as me? No. So the system that we have today in South Africa is rotten from within. It's not able to deal with the challenges that the country is facing, because from within, we've got people who are not sincere with their jobs.
Now, Tony, everything that you've just said makes it sound a lot like you were about to make an announcement of a change of party, because it seems to be the talking points that are coming from most of the other parties, to be honest. Let's talk about some of the political happenings over the last year. I mean, the ANC eventually ran out of runway with its own bad service delivery, its own commitment to corruption, etc., and got 40% at the last election. That damage was largely inflicted by former President Jacob Zuma throwing in his lot with Mkhonto Wesizwe. Now, you've always had a good relationship with him, haven't you?
Yes, I've had a good relationship with President Jacob Zuma, not only here at home, but in exile. When we were in exile, I used to work a lot with him, especially when I was based in Lesotho, because he was the main sort of contact between us and headquarters in Lusaka. And OR would send him to Lesotho from time to time to come and help us about various things. Well, some of the comrades would be arrested with arms. So then Jacob Zuma would be sent by OR to come and negotiate with the Basutus, and so on and so forth. So yes, we've had a good working relationship together. But I disagree with you on this notion of the damage was. I hear this all the time on TV with the analysts saying Jacob Zuma has made a dent. He is the cause of the
decline.
The decline from 57%.
Well, I mean, they lost 17%, the ANC, and he got 15, so the numbers match up.
Yeah, but as a person who's in the belly of the beast, if you like, I know better. Well, the analysts out there say, well, I know better. The issue I'm raising is that the ANC's demise or decline has been occasioned by self-inflicted wounds. It's internally based. It's not Julius Malema. It's not Jacob Zuma. It's not anybody else. The ANC itself as an organization needs to relook at itself. How do people reject the ANC in such a major way? You know, ANC has been riding the crest for the longest time as a premier national liberation movement in the country and in the continent. What has happened? And I think that's where the issue is for me. You know, when the ANC went through crisis in the 70s, you'll remember that we, at some point, Mkhonto Wesizwe went through Zimbabwe to attempt to come into South Africa. Then they got engaged there with Smith's forces. A number of comrades died, and some of them were arrested by the frontline states, sent to prison, and so on and so forth. That was a difficult moment when those comrades came back from prison, complaining that the organization didn't look after them. It was very, very difficult. The tension between the political leadership and the military leadership Then OR called a conference, the Morogoro conference in Tanzania. Said everybody was there. Those things were discussed, resolved, and the ANC came out united, and it proceeded. Even when 1985, there was a conference called in Cabo in Zambia, because there was a mutiny in our camps. Comrades started killing each other and taking over the camps. So the leadership resolved that the mutiny should be dealt with militarily, and that was done. But also the leadership resolved that there must be a political solution to the problem. Let's call a national conference. Let's call everybody around under one roof. Let's talk about the difficult points and resolve these points and move forward. We cannot move forward without that. Now, let's roll forward. May 2024. We have that dip from 57% to 40%. What do? We confine the issue to the NEC or to the leadership. We don't open it up and say, okay, this is very serious now. This is just very, very, very serious. Let everybody come. Let's have a special conference where we can have a real, deep, genuine introspection on what has happened. No, that was not done. And I think that's the crux of the matter for me. I think as long as we're in denial as the ANC about the problems that we're facing internally, those problems are going to eat us slowly until we finish. We're dead. Because we're in denial, we want to use scapegoats. No, it's Julius. No, it's Zuma. No, it's this, it's that. No, there are deeper problems in the ANC than Jacob Zuma or Julius Malema or any other person for that matter.
Yeah. Now, we're going to take a look at the current political landscape as you see it in a few minutes. But Jacob Zuma tactic of starting a new party but wanting to stay in the ANC, which is, I know you can have one wife and then get another wife in certain cultures, but I'm not sure about belonging to a whole lot of different political parties. But you were the guy who actually tried to defend him, to keep him as an ANC member, even while he is clearly an MK member. Explain that to me.
Well, every time I meet journalists talking to me, they always ask that question.
You've got to understand, it makes no sense.
It's an interesting question. I agree.
Billions of people.
Comrade Zuma says to South Africa, I'm ANC and I will die ANC. And then people say, yeah, well, how can you say that when you are in another party? And the way I explain it and the way I understand him myself as his representative in the DC processes in the ANC is that I throw it back to me to say, I'm ANC myself and I will die ANC. Okay. By that I mean, I've been in the ANC now for maybe 50 years of my whole life, a full member of the ANC. I've been in the NEC of the ANC of that 50 years, 30 years of my life was a member of the NEC of the ANC. So there is no way that you can take the ANC out of my system, out of my life. It's there. I will die with ANC. I think that's what it means, that even this thing of saying that he's expelled from the ANC, he has said it publicly that he's going to deal with that thing, he's going to appeal, because he refuses to accept that the ANC belongs to some people and not to others. And he has said also publicly that actually the people who are usurping the leadership of the ANC are new people. Homa Figazoro, they don't know the ANC. the way he does. They've not sacrificed as much as he has done for the ANC, as he has done for the ANC. So it's not an either or issue. Try as you may, as you might, you're not going to take the ANC out of Zuma.
But do you not see this as you were saying, the self-correction, the problem within, is exactly this devotion to the past, as opposed to the new people coming in, right? The new people coming in is going to happen. That we can't be God to that one, right? You know, you're going to get retirement, death, etc. People are going to move on. And if the organization is to last, I mean, the organization is 112 years old, 113 nearly. You know, in that time, it changed. Why is it problematic that people are coming in there wanting to change it?
No, that's not the issue really, new people coming in. But new people coming in must respect the traditions of the organization. Okay. In our own communities, in our own families, we are taught that those who come before us, we should respect them and learn from them. But the issue here for me is that the way they treat people, it's not right. Having been the representative of President Zuma in the DC, we raised the issue, for example, of a physical meeting where President Zuma will be called in by the ANC and the DC will come into the meeting and the process will start. So we made that request that there must be a physical DC process where Zuma can look at his accusers in the eye and say, but what is this? What are you talking about? So that they can discuss it amicably amongst them as comrades. No, the meeting must be virtual. You must go into a virtual meeting. You know, so this is an old man of 80-something. I mean, do you think he's not comfortable with that? He will want you to sit like the old days in a meeting and we discuss this matter, politically and otherwise. No. You know. So they treated me and they treated him like pieces of nothing. That's one of my gripes about that process. I was denied every request that I made to them. So also the way they treat people, they have no respect for people and what they've gone through and their sacrifices. They treat him like they treat another little boy. And Jacob found that very offensive. He found that very, very offensive. So the ANC is supposed to be a caring organization, caring for its members, caring for its people. But these days, people are dealt with in a very rough way. Either take it or leave it.
Do you not think that that maybe the problem stretches way back to into the new South Africa, that the ANC should have reconstituted itself not as a movement but as a political party?
Well, we had a long discussion about that, whether a political party. We came to the conclusion after a long debate that we'd rather retain the format of being a liberation movement, because we didn't want to lose all the important traditions of the ANC, rich traditions that we come with from the past. One of those things was this the unity of the ANC, which since its inception in 1912 was the main theme of the ANC, keeping our people together, fighting together. Because we didn't have, weapons to fight. We were fighting the English and colonialists with spears and shields. You know, so unity became the main clarion call of the ANC, keeping our people together, our forces together. Because if we are divided, there is no chance of getting even a little piece of legislation through Parliament.
And what do you feel, having been on the sharp end of the struggle, about the fact that you're now sitting, as we are now, in Parliament, when you were in Parliament, in the Government of National Unity? We're going to talk about the politics in a second. But with people who in the past you feel may have represented the people you're fighting against.
So what is your question there?
The question is, are you comfortable with with that unity, not just within the party, but within the country?
The country is divided at this point in time, as far as I'm concerned. And no one is standing up and saying, like Madiba would have done if he was alive, you know, let's all come together. Let's come. He will call everybody into one meeting. And he will say to us all, I know that you are all fighting. That's why I called you. And no one is going to leave this meeting before we resolve this issue. Okay, that was the type of leader that Mandela was. But today in South Africa,
to be fair, sorry to interrupt you, to be fair, all of his successors, successors, not successors, Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma, Cyril, have kept that card in the pocket, that card of division, to play it strategically whenever they feel like. So when you point out the failings, then they say, oh, but, land. The failing of the justice of apartheid. Do you not think that, do you see a unifier, or do you think that the ANC should have been more of a unifier than what it was?
The ANC should emerge as a unifier, unifying, in the first instance, the poor black masses and saying to them, come together, let's be the solution makers in this country. Don't be observers and sit back and look at all what is happening and complain. Come, let's go together. No, the ANC goes into a coalition or a GNU with the DA and excludes MK, AZAP, PAC, EFF, and so on. And that, I don't buy this notion that the reasons that are being bandied about that they didn't want. I think if they really wanted them in the government, they would have been able to get them into the government. That creates another problem. So the division now it's getting bigger and bigger, because everybody, every day you hear some important person saying, we don't want this GNU, we don't want this GNU. Even the workers the other day, in some meeting somewhere, they were having a song there. We don't want the GNU. So,
and Paul Mashatile joined in.
Yeah, Paul Mashatile joined in. So there's tension in the country, there's divisions in the country, and no one is emerging as a leader who calls upon people to be calm, people to come together. Now, if the ANC doesn't call all of us together from all walks of life and say, guys, this thing is bad now, we need everybody to come in. How is anybody else going to do that if the ANC itself can't do that? Can't call all its cadres at all levels and say, comrades, it's bad. Let's come together. Let's look at this thing together. Let's find a solution together. No, they prefer certain people, not certain people. And that's, I think, is a source of tension.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do right now is we're going to thank Tony Yengeni for part one, where we discussed the past, and we're going to have a look into the future in part two, But if you've enjoyed this, support Pace Car Rental. They keep us on air. Hire a car from them. Use the code SONA to get a discount. Like and subscribe the State of the Nation channel. And we're going to see you in part 2 of this discussion with Tony Yengeni.